you?
Good,
Good.
good.
All right. Well, welcome back to Black Hills Insider. Today's episode is a little different and a little special. If you're a regular listener, you're used to hearing Falina ask the questions, guide the conversations about what's going on in Belle Fourche in the Black Hills. But today, we're going to flip the microphone around.
I'm kind of excited, a little bit nervous, I'm not gonna lie. I'm usually on the asking questions side of things, not
Good.
the on the spotlight answering, so this will humble me.
Awesome. I think we call that the hot seat.
I know, right? We need that today, it's cold out there.
It is. It is. Well, awesome. So thank you for doing this. I think this is going to be so much fun. I'm looking forward to stepping outside of just kind of typical questions and kind of we'll ask some hard ones, but it's going to be really conversational.
I'm
So,
ready for the
all right.
challenge.
All right. Most of you know Felina. She's a mother. She's a wife. She's your neighbor. She's a business owner. You've probably seen her on a board or two or 10. She's involved in the community. Now candidate for Ward 2 City Council.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Well, for those of you that don't know you, tell us what does this mean for you? What does running for city council mean for you? Why now?
So, I will say about, gosh, 2 years ago, I think, I was a graduate of the Leadership Belle Fourche class. And that's where we came in, and I thought I was gonna learn a lot about business ownership. And really, what I learned more of was how our city works, where some of our pitfalls are, things that we've done really well, businesses who have made a huge impact in our community, people who've made a great impact in our community. And I was like, I feel like I'm being called to do more.
Mhm.
And so Holly is the one who runs that, and she's with economic development. And I asked her in there, I said, "Hey, so where's a list of boards that we can get involved in, or how can we get involved in the community?" And so we went and we got this big list compiled. And I remember going home and talking to my husband and feeling like, I was kind of a bad kid in this community. And I was like, I want to be able to give back. And how better to do that than to just get really involved in our community? So people will be like, why did you get on so many boards? And I'll be honest with you, I feel like I got a little bit of a later start in life. So I didn't start volunteering in our community until more recently.
Mhm.
I've always been listening on the back end, but I've never been boots on the ground in the action of it.
Mhm.
And so I joined 2 boards right away, and then I ended up on a 3rd one, and that's kind of a funny story. So that was the Hometown Thursdays board, and if any of you know Chip Connor, who is our board president, he asked me, he goes, "Hey, Felina, we could use your help social media-wise. Would you like to be on a committee?" And I was like, "Yes, not taking on other board positions, but I'll do a committee." So we show up to the first meeting, and he's like, "So these are our new board members?" And I'm like, "Excuse me?" And he goes, "Oh, yeah, we don't have committee members, they're board members. Thanks for volunteering." I was like, "Oh, Chip." So, I ended up being on that board, and then another year later, I was asked to be a part of the Realtor for Kids board. And, a lot of my decisions for running for certain boards and things are because, 1, I'm very passionate about business and business startups. And I'm also very passionate about our kids in our community, whether they're mine, yours, your grandkids, whoever it is. I'm just very passionate about kids in our community. So as long as something aligns there, um, I really wanted to be involved. And I thought, what better way than to get a fire hose to the face of servant leadership? Because that was kind of like my stepping stone. And so the timeline's a little off, which we'll get into, but I was like, if I join these positions, they are 3-year board positions. That will allow me to run for city council in 2027 when there's a seat that opens. So I went on the website and I was like, okay, this is when these terms are up. If I join these boards, that'll give me 3 years to learn how boards operate, how decisions are made, how impacts can happen in our communities, and then I'll run for city council. So, um, that was always on my radar
Yeah.
for the last several years, and I've been working towards that, and I've let a handful of people in on my thought process and where I wanna go, and, people always ask me, "Is city council the end?" And I say, "No, it's not." I've had people already encouraging me to run for mayor, and I'm like, "Well, maybe someday, but let's let's see how city council works first." And I've even looked into state politics, so I
Nice.
feel like this is just the way
Mm,
that you step into the community and you help out with boots on the ground,
yeah,
really. So that was kind of why I decided to get started and jump in, like I said, with a fire hose to the face. You'll see all my board books back there.
yeah.
That's how I keep track of everything.
It's impressive. I was actually eyeballing it. I was like, sorry.
Yeah, that's how I keep it all straight because honestly, just being a mom and my kids are super involved in
Yeah,
sports and being on 4 different boards and now running for city council, it's a lot.
yeah,
It really is, but I've got the most amazing support system at
right.
home, my kids, my husband. This decision wasn't made lightly.
Yeah,
There were a lot of conversations about it and so we decided that as a family, we all decided that we are willing to jump in feet first because there's been people trying to scare us out of it and there's people encouraging and
yeah.
you kind of have every end of the spectrum there,
Yeah, yeah. Oh, so much to
but
unpack there. I mean, we could go
ask
anywhere.
away.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you've like touched on, I always thought that I was going to have the right stepping stones
Hmm.
for things. And I think that's typically how we think about things like if I have a plan, then I work my
Yeah.
plan and like things come to fruition. But I think, softball curves are the exception are not the exception, they are the rule.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so obviously there was probably a moment, maybe a conversation or something in there. What was the pivot for you to say, plans aside?
Running now.
Yeah.
So what happened was a few months ago, we had a council person step down and that opened up a seat in my ward, which is Ward 2. And Clark Sowers ran and he ran unopposed.
Mhm.
And then so when we saw yet another council representative step down again, that's when I was like, okay, you know what? I think we need to pivot. And before I even made the decision, the first thing that I did was talk to my rock, which is my husband. He's always like he's my very level-headed person and I'm always like, "Let's do everything." And he's like, "Honey, let's think it through first." And
Sure.
I'm like,
Excellent.
"Perfect." Yeah. So we did that. We talked. I will say he's hesitant. He is. He's seen some of the backlash that I've
Yeah.
been getting and so he's my protector. And so of course there's a little bit of hesitancy there. The next step was talking to the board presidents for 2 boards that I serve on because if I am elected, I will have to be removed from those boards. And so before I put them in a bad situation, I wanted to talk to those presidents and get their blessing. So I went, and I talked to each one of them and I said, "Hey, I'm really considering running for council, but that will mean I have to step down, 6 months or a year earlier than my commitment to you." And both of them said the same pretty much the same thing overall is that, it's a lot easier to find people who are willing to commit to a board than it is for people who are willing to commit to city council. And we really need good people on council who are not going to quit on us. So please, you have our blessing. Please run. We will pivot and we will figure out
Yeah.
the boards afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
It,
Everything's workable.
and that's if I get elected,
Right. Of
which
course.
hopeful. But, if it doesn't happen, then I will just continue to serve out those terms on those boards.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. So what's the wrestle with this? Like this to me is like scary, right?
Yeah.
Stepping up, stepping in, stepping into your shine,
Yeah.
uh, really starting to own all of these things that you've been building for yourself and, like, trusting that.
Yeah.
And so what's the wrestle here? What's
I don't want to give too much away, and you and I haven't even talked about this, but my husband and I had some pretty big plans that we were going to do for 2026, and that means putting them on the back burner to
Okay.
run for city council.
Mm,
So there was that. We were hoping to have our plan done and over with by 2026, so that way it was smooth sailing into 2027. But sometimes, like you said, life throws you curveballs, and
yeah,
sometimes you just have to pivot and really look inside yourself and say, like, hey, this has been on my heart now for years. I mean,
yeah,
I've been planning for this for years. It wasn't like I just made this decision yesterday to say, "Oh, I'm really upset that this is not working right with the
yeah,
city,"
mhm,
or "I really wanna get involved because it's working well." That wasn't the case. I mean, this was literally on my radar for forever. It's just that that timeline got moved up a little bit.
yeah,
Um, but, there's a lot that happens when you step out into the public. I learned it real hardcore when I started my real estate company, being online,
yeah,
just the criticism that
mhm,
happens, and I've got a pretty big following on social media, in the tens of thousands. And so you get a lot of backlash from that. But, and we've talked about this before, but at the same time, that doesn't hurt
Right.
because those aren't my neighbors. And that's
Mhm.
a concern for me on city council because I want to make everybody happy. And I know that that's not going to work all the time. I
Right.
know that there's going to be times where I have to make a decision that votes against this person, but it was the overall consensus of our
Yeah.
ward. So, there's going to be times I'm going to have to vote against myself too.
Yeah.
And I know that that's just something that I'm going to struggle with, and
Yeah.
that's where I think it's important that you have that strong support system behind you of friends, family, my husband, all of that, where I can come home and I can be like, this is going to be a really hard vote,
Yeah.
and I'm going to get backlash for this. I've already had people say, your business people are going to hold this against you and they're going to boycott your business for that. And so I really had to grapple with that. But at the same time, I'm like, my heart says that this is the
Yeah.
right thing to do for our community and for our family. And so we are willing to take that risk.
Yeah. So I love this. I love like I'm sacrificing some plans in there to do this.
Hmm.
And the call is I
Yeah.
think what you're saying here is that I'm feeling this call that's so
Yeah.
strong.
It's just been on my heart for so
Yeah.
long. And like, whether you're a religious person or not, I feel like everything happens for a reason. And sometimes God just pushes you in a certain
Yeah.
direction,
Yeah.
and it's like that it's what's on my heart, and so I really have to do this because if I let this go, then I don't get to run again for a little while,
Right.
and then who's gonna run next time? But,
Right.
then it was also like a shock because Clark ran unopposed at the last special or the
Okay.
last election, and then this time it's like, "Whoa, there's 4 people with their
Right.
hat in the ring." So, it's great to see so many people stepping up, so I do
Mhm.
appreciate that, but, it doesn't come with some sacrifice though,
Yeah. Yeah.
overall.
Well, and I think, I love what you're touching on is that even if we have plans, is that sometimes like we're waiting until we're ready.
Yeah.
Sometimes like we just have to step into it
Mhm.
and the readiness will come afterwards.
Yeah, and, there's that too, like, I'm not young, but I'm young for what most people see when
Right.
someone steps into, a government role or a political role or whatever you wanna call it. Um I'll be 40 this year, and that's still fairly young
Yeah.
to be stepping into that type of a role. But I also feel at the same time like I have immersed myself so
Yeah.
much in city council already
Yes.
and going down and talking to the police station and seeing what our officers go through on a day-to-day basis and going to the landfill and seeing how that works and how that operates. Like I've already done all of that stuff, but there's still that thought in the back of my mind of you're too young for this or
Mm.
you're not,
Mm.
equipped well enough or anything like that. So then I took it upon myself to talk to so many city council reps,
Mhm.
current and former city council. I was like, give me the good, the bad, the ugly. Like, I want to know what I'm getting into. So that way, when the fire is put to my feet, like I am prepared.
Yes.
So I had so many good conversations too. So it's, while it's scary in a sense, it's also exhilarating. And
Yes.
so it just depends on the moment of the day when someone's like, oh my God, are you excited? I'm like, yes. Or are you excited? I'm like, struggling for a minute. Give me come back in 15 minutes,
Well, and I love that because I think like, we when we make those decisions to step outside of ourselves, to step into something bigger, when we
Yeah.
have that call to step into something bigger, I love that you're leaning on your faith here because there is a trust,
Yes.
a trust that I'm going to be caught, it is going to work out, whatever that looks like.
It's a trust fall if I have ever tried one in my whole life.
Exactly. Yeah.
But, to that point too, though, like, we get lit up online from time to time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, looking back to that trust fall, I've had people message me and they're like, "Why are you continuing to do this? Because you just got, ran through the ringer on there." And I'm like, but at the same time, like, when you think about the trust fall, I don't know if you remember doing that in school, but it's
Mhm.
like you were supposed to fall back and there was like a handful of people behind you. So 1 or 2 people might be like, "You know what? Not for me," and pull their
Right.
hands out, but like for every 1 or 2 people that was super loud and dare I say nasty for lack of a better term online
Yeah.
to me, I had 10 to 15 messages of people saying like, "Hey, we're silently in your corner. We're rooting for you. We've got you. We're holding you up. Like if you need talk, if you need prayer, whatever that is, we're
Yeah.
here for you." And so that was such a beautiful thing that came out of kind of a negative, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, and I think also too, I mean, for you to trust the fault, right?
Yeah.
You might know that people are behind you, but are they gonna catch you? Are they not? I don't know. But to
Right.
actually just go ahead and be like, "All right, whatever it is, I'm ready for it,"
Yep.
is such a pivotal moment. And I think, like, it teaches us who we are,
Yeah.
and it shows us how strong we are. Incredible learning. So it doesn't matter if you've got the experience, if you've got something else, if you have the grit
Yeah.
and you know who you are
Yeah.
and you stand firm in that.
And that's what comes from failing before too,
Yeah.
you fail and you fail I always say failure is never a bad thing as long as you learn from it.
Right.
I call it failing forward. Like,
Yes.
you might trip and fall on your face, but as long as you get back up and you learn from it and you move forward
Yeah.
and you continue to do that over and over and over, but that comes from wisdom. I mean, if you would have talked to me 10 years ago, that would not have been my conversation. Like,
Right.
there was 10 years of personal and professional development in there for me to learn a lot of these life lessons,
Yeah.
but um I think that they have really shaped me into the person that I am today to put me in this position to be willing to take those sacrifices for our family, to be better for our community, and to
Yeah.
make our community better for not just my kids, but your kids and all of our grandkids and things like that. And it takes people who are willing to, make those sacrifices to step up and put yourself in those uncomfortable positions
Yeah.
to advance the city forward. So you need people who are running with passion.
Yeah. And, a thicker skin
Yeah.
even. For
Passion,
sure.
purpose, and damn thick skin.
Exactly.
It's what I
Well,
was talking about with that book, The Rhinoceros Success, is a book that I read, gosh, it was probably 10 years ago. When you start putting yourself out there publicly, like online,
mhm.
you just get so much kickback. Like
Yes.
the mean, nasty comments about your looks, your anything online.
Yeah.
And so I had a mentor tell me, like, read that book, The Rhinoceros Success. And I was
Nice.
like, oh my gosh, like that is so true. And people ask me too. They're like, "Well, how do you handle this all?" And I'm like, "You know what? The thing is like there's so many cool sayings that you could say, but the best one I think is like hurt people hurt people. Just because that person's having a bad day and lashes out on me doesn't mean that I'm their enemy,
Right.
you know. And so you have to be able to set yourself up with that mindset moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's like such a great spot to kind of just dive into because I think I would love to if we conquer some of these myths
Yeah.
about this role, this work
Yeah.
in there. And I know one of the things that you've been doing is showing up to meetings.
Yep.
I mean, in addition to the meetings you already go to.
Yes.
And when things are coming up and brought up in the meetings, I know you're taking an extra step and speaking to other city employees and trying to get more information in there. And
Mhm.
then you're trying to distill that information online on social media
Yeah.
and bridge in that transparency aspect, but trying to bridge that. And social media is such a interesting space.
It can be, yes.
And so tell me
Yeah.
what that's been like to step into that stage
Yeah.
and try and work some of that stuff of transparency and information gathering and being the steward.
Mhm.
Tell me what that's been
So,
like.
well, I will say that's where sometimes you get the crap kicked out of you, for lack of a better term. I've been online for the better part of a decade, doing social media management, growing an online presence, things like that. Well before I even started my real estate
Yeah.
career. So I've learned what it's like to have people hate you no matter what, which is probably why I won't allow my kids to have social media right now. But that was also part of the reason I wanted to run for council. Again, this is stemming back for years. One, I don't think the city is being malicious. I just want to say that, put that out there for the record. I do not think that the city is being malicious or trying to hide information from people. But as a community member who I feel is pretty well plugged into the community, it is sometimes hard to find that information.
Yes.
And so I think that that's part of the reason that I wanted to run was that I wanted to be able to, I feel like I'm really good at getting information, breaking it down in easy to understand manners,
Yeah.
and then re-delivering that information. So I do that a lot in real estate. A
Yes.
lender will call someone and be like, there's this program, da 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 da. And then my clients call me and they're like, what the hell did they just say? Like, that was a foreign language. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, so it's kind of like this, but it's not like the arm. And then I explain it in a simple to understand way. And they're like, oh my God, you made it so much easier to understand. And I say, that's my gift. you
Yeah.
know? So that's kind of where I wanted to go with the transparency of the city. Again, I don't think the city's being malicious. I don't think they're intentionally trying to hide anything. It's just I'm looking at it from the consumer side of things of where am I supposed to find that information? Who do I contact? So when people are complaining on Facebook or something like that, I'm like, who did you try to call? Because I'm not going to assume that they didn't.
Fair.
Maybe they got ignored. I don't know. So I'm going to be like, okay, who did you try to contact? Okay, you didn't get the questions you were answering or that you were asking, or you didn't try the right person. Let's get you to the right person. Or if your concerns weren't being addressed, let's get you to the next person up. And I've just involved myself enough in the city that like I know those steps. But again, that's really hard for somebody
Yes.
who hasn't immersed themselves in there. But that doesn't mean that their voice doesn't matter.
Correct.
So I want to be online and like one of my big goals is to create like a Facebook space for our Ward 2 members and just have our Ward 2 people in there so that they can freely speak
Mhm.
online without fear of ridicule, being attacked, just asking the right questions. Because here's the thing, like, even in real estate, okay, I've been doing this for a while now. And so when people ask me questions, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like, I do this every day. So I didn't even think about that. That was a great question. Let me make sure that I address that for you. And I want people to have that safe space where they could reach out to me as a council person and say, like, hey, I don't wanna publicly say this on Facebook because I don't want this person yelling at me or this person yelling at me, but I think it needs to be addressed. I wanna be that safe space for people, so that way I can be like, "Okay, citizens are asking this. Well, how can we do this?" Because even me being as involved as I am scared shitless to go to a city council meeting and stand up for that 3 minutes. And
Mhm.
anyone who's ever watched me on that camera knows I take a piece of paper up there because when I get nervous, I will, like, and squirrel moment even on this podcast. So I like to go up there and be prepared. But a lot of people are like, oh, I'm not ready for that,
Right.
you know? And so that's why we're there as
Yeah.
council people. Like, we need to have people wanting to reach out to us so that we can be like, I hear your concern. I understand exactly where you're coming from. And maybe I can answer it right then and there and be like, I've already done the research on that. Here's your answer. Or this is the person we need to talk to. Would you rather I bring this up at a council meeting or would you rather I just, maybe three-way email conversation, whatever that is, just so that we can get those questions answered for people. And I think that that will help bridge that gap of the cities trying to hide stuff versus transparency. And it's more just how you want that information,
Right.
which in today's day and age, that's going on to Facebook.
Right. And that's something, social media is not going away.
No, no,
And
it's the
and
future, whether we like it or not.
right. And, for lack of a better communication system, that seems to be where most people are going to get their
Yeah.
information. And so I love this, real focus on distilling things into easy to understand terms
Yeah.
and making them just really like palatable
Yeah.
to everybody. I think sometimes, kind of what you're saying with the real estate
Hmm.
terminology and the lenders is like things get really lofty and people are like, I have no idea. That was a different language.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so to bring it back into real terms and real impacts is going to be key. And
Yeah.
so what sets Ward 2 apart? What makes it distinct?
So the cool thing about Ward 2 is we've got a very like solid mix of houses. And so we have a solid mix of probably income levels. Not that there's obviously not balance. You could make $1,000,000 and still live in, a $150,000 house, or you could
Okay.
make $150,000 a year and live in $1,000,000 house. So that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but there's just a very diverse set of people within Ward 2. In my opinion, you have people who are brand new to the community and you have people who have been here longer than I've been
Mhm.
alive. And so it's just a very diverse group of people in our community because Ward 2 is pretty much sandwiched right in the middle of town.
Yes.
You know? And so it in my opinion, I'm sorry because 'cause you're Ward 1, but Ward 2 is my favorite part of Belle Fourche because I can walk to the coffee shops downtown,
Yes.
but I can also walk to the rec center and the high school, and so I just love where it's at, but it's such a beautiful area, but there is a very diverse group of people in there, so trying to make everybody in Ward 2 happy, I think is going to be a very difficult task. But again, I think that's where the communication and all of that comes into play. Um, to give you like a real life example,
Yeah.
you or maybe some of our listeners saw everything that happened online. I tried to do my best about being transparent, even though I'm not on city council, I'm just a citizen in the community at
Yes.
this point, right? So there was a special meeting that was put up about cameras because a decision needed to be made pretty quickly. And so I was like, okay, I feel like I can juggle my day. So I rearranged a couple meetings and made it down to city council because there was a big uproar online about people not being able to make it during noon.
Right.
I was like, I get that. Like, I've been in
Mhm.
corporate America, I've been an entrepreneur. Sometimes it's easy to get away, sometimes it's not. So I was like, well, I'll go there and I'll bridge the gap. So I took notes. And then, of course, I had a really busy day afterwards trying to catch up for the meetings. And I went on, excuse me, and I tried to like break it down
Yes.
eh, because I didn't even say whether I was pro or anti camera on that. Because here's the thing, and this is why I didn't put my 2 cents on there of my personal opinion. Because when I'm running for council, I'm not running for my own personal agenda. I'm not running because I am pro this or anti this. I'm running because our community needs good people standing up with a voice who are not afraid to ask the hard questions, who are not afraid to kind of make sure that we are being good stewards of finances and not just being a yes man.
Yeah.
Like we don't need any more of that. Like, and I'm not saying anyone on the council currently is like that, but like, that's just been historically what people are like, "Oh, I hate this politician because they're this or this, and this is government and da da da."
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I'm not there for myself. So I intentionally did not put my 2 cents in there. All I said was, I have a better understanding of why this meeting was rushed. I have a better understanding of why these cameras were even on the thought process and why the little pivot was made. That's all I said was that I have a better understanding now that I
Mhm.
attended the meeting and here's the information I relayed. So I was just very factual in
Yes.
that post. And I got a lot of backlash for that.
Yes.
I got a lot of, "Oh, Felina just wants a police state in Belle Fourche." And honestly, like, that literally made me laugh out loud because anyone who's been in this community a long time who knows maybe a little bit of my background
Right.
would know that police state was the farthest thing that I would ever be okay with. And anyone who was in my leadership class in, I think it was 2022. What's that say over there? I can't read that far. Um, I think I was a 2022 graduate or 2023, something like that. Um, I was the biggest pain in the butt to our chief of police when he started talking cameras. Like, this was me.
Yeah.
"You're doing what? Why?" And then he told me. And so initially, I was very anti-camera. I still
Mhm.
don't love the cameras. I still don't like the cameras. But initially, I was very anti-camera and I was
Mhm.
very anti, police don't need to watch what I'm doing, anything like that.
Mhm.
Well, then after Shervany, chief of police wrote the report out of how many calls they get for domestic violence,
Mhm.
children being harmed in our community,
Yeah.
drugs that are happening, things like this. I'm like, whoa. As someone who was a naughty kid and who ran in a lot of those circles and
Yes.
who has now broke the chains and completely transformed my life, I can see both sides of the story,
Yes.
right? And so initially I was like really taken back and upset that cameras were even thought about being put in our community. But then once I was given a lot more information about like, hey, this is what's actually happening. And
Mhm.
again, this kind of goes back to the transparency thing. And I
Mhm.
know I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but the transparency thing, everybody's like, oh, Belfish is perfect. Nothing ever happens. We have this perfect community that nothing happens. And I'm like, I don't think it, the, and that's one thing I do kind of want to advocate for. And I'm not trying to go against the police
Right.
or the city council or anything like that. I think our citizens deserve to hear a little bit more of what happens. And I'm not saying we need to say names. We do not need to even know what day that incident happened. We don't need to know any of the specifics. But just there was this many calls for domestic abuse. There was this many calls for mistreatment of children or animals, or there was this many calls for fights that had to be broken up or investigated. I think that just even a monthly report telling us like what's happening would help people understand why sometimes these decisions are made by the council or the police department or things like that. Because as much as I would love to also say that we live in a little bubble here,
Right.
we are no different than the rest of the
Right.
country. We might be our small little pocket of community, but we still have our own issues that we need to work on. You know, I
Yeah.
feel that we are doing a great job as a community, but there's still more work to do. There's always more work to do. So we need people who are willing to stand up, who are willing to listen to both sides of the story, who are willing to put their own personal opinions and bias away
Mhm.
to make the better decision
Mhm.
for our community and for our kids in our communities.
Yeah. I love this example because you're touching on so many points here. One is that you had an idea
Mhm.
and were kind of the opposite of what you came to the other side on.
Yeah.
And I love that you brought in more information and, having the real conversations and learning the real statistics,
Mhm.
because that's a very real world example of what changes our mind about things.
Yeah.
And that we have the ability to change our mind. And that is, we should, as stewards to this community,
Mhm.
once we get more information, be able to use that information and then go, oh, I think differently now.
Yeah.
And I am thinking in a way that is going to keep our community safer and
Yeah.
better on there. And it doesn't mean you have to love it, right? Like that's not, you don't
Yeah.
have to love it, but
I don't love it.
but if you love safety and you love your kids being able to go to the park and not
Yeah.
have to worry about something happening.
Yeah, and what a lot of people don't understand too is, like, again, I'm not okay. I don't like the cameras. I understand why we have them, but I don't have to like them.
Right.
And even to that point, I stayed after that meeting with my husband for, I don't know, it was like an hour or 2, and we were asking more questions about them because
Mhm.
there was also a brief little conversation where they were saying that they were gonna open the cameras to the public. And I was like, "Mm-mm, I'm not okay with that." And even my husband was like, "Okay, but hold on." He goes, "What if," because again, my husband's my biggest protector. And so he's like, "Wait a minute. What if my wife is on the walking path and all of a sudden someone who doesn't like a decision that she made on council or, online or something like that, they start watching this camera and then they're like, "Oh, well, she is on this bike path from this time to this time.
Yeah.
So that's where we know we can attack her." And I heard, "Well, they could be standing there with a cell phone too." My husband has beat into my brain, not literally. Okay, no domestic violence here, but, he has literally, like, beat it into me from living in bigger cities like Jacksonville, Florida, that you have to be very conscious of your surroundings. Like,
Yeah.
yes, we are in a very pretty safe area here, but it doesn't mean that we are free from all crime,
Right.
okay? So, I've been taught to watch my surroundings, to make sure that I'm not being followed and things like that. Because anyone who knows me from 25 years ago, when I met my husband, we've been together be 20 years next 20 years next month. Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you. uh when we moved to Jacksonville, Florida, he's like, "You can't go to the mall alone." Oh, well, anyone who knows me from 20 years ago, I was like, "You're not going to tell me what I can and cannot do. I'm a big girl and I will take care of myself and I
Right.
do not need you." Right. And then come to find out 2 weeks later, there was, a man that was caught there, and he had his trunk with duct tape, all the things to kidnap women and do what he was gonna do
Yeah.
with them, and so that was very eye-opening to me. In Jacksonville, when I was coming home from work and the helicopter started landing in front of me, and I'm like, "I wasn't going that fast, okay?" And then come to find out, I'm getting calls from my husband's Navy buddies, and they're like, "Where are you? We're coming to get you." And I'm like, "I'm at home. Like, I just got home from work. What happened?" Some guy just decided he was gonna walk up to 5 people and shoot them and kill them,
Wow.
just a couple blocks from our house.
Yeah.
So, I've moved away enough to know that this is the possibility of what
Right.
our community could turn into, and I'm not naive enough to know that, like, this could come to our
Yeah.
community, and we need to take proactive steps to make sure that our citizens and our children in these communities are safe,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and, as somebody who myself has worked, in many environments, one of the things that was we always said to families is surveillance doesn't always equal safety.
Right.
So, having one of the things I know you're super passionate about is having, community outputs, activities,
Yes.
things
Yes.
for our children to do so they aren't the, naughty Felina that
Yeah.
was
Yeah, if you weren't into sports, it was drugs or alcohol, and I was like
right, and so, I know one of the things that you're
Yeah.
passionate about is to have those outlets and to
Yeah.
have those things, and that is part of being proactive, is to ensure that our community has the things, the parks that are safe to go
Yeah.
to so that we can have the ball games at the
Mhm.
parks. We can have other people come to our community and feel safe
Yeah.
here as well.
And I will tell you too, just to go back to that, these cameras have been in the process for a long time.
Right.
Like, I'm telling you, when I was in my leadership class, they were already talking about the cameras and how
Yeah.
they were there. And I think, no, don't get me wrong, I am not a proponent of somebody sitting on their butt and watching those cameras all day. And I think that there should be logs. Like,
Yeah.
nobody should be able to get into those cameras without a log of this officer logged in at this time for this specific thing. And so I think there should be a huge accountability aspect to that so that they don't and I love our police force. I don't think that there's gonna be any issues, but again, being proactive, I'm like, How can we write the rules
Right.
so that there's never 5 years down the road when we maybe do get a different officer, someone who's like, I'm just gonna sit here and watch,
Right.
because we like to think that everybody is always good, but there could be a time where there's not. So there needs to be checks and balances and parameters and things like that. But I think about this, I've done way too much research on crimes against children. And if you've never watched the documentary 8 Days, I think that's a very important one for people to watch.
Mhm.
If they're so upset about the cameras, and again, I'm still very gray on that area,
Yeah.
but I think if anyone is really upset about the cameras, I think they should watch that movie 8 Days. It's a hard watch, and don't watch it in front of your kids. Um, but that one was very eye-opening to me. So I always think about and it's so easy, like, when you get information to lash out right
Yeah.
away of either I'm very happy about this or I'm very pissed about this.
Mhm.
It's hard for people to sit back and get the information and take a few days to think on it before they make a decision. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I again, I initially was pretty pissed off about the cameras. That's why I rearranged my day to go to that meeting. And then I got to thinking and I was like, okay, thinking back to 8 days, I'm just going to use somebody else's kid as an example because we all know that we're going to fight like hell for our own kids.
Right.
But let's just say it's my friend's kid. And they were at the park and they got picked up by a predator. Okay. Because it's it's been attempted in this town before. So it's not like it's never going to happen. Okay. So let's just say that, my friend's kid, somebody abducted them from one of the parks. Because we all are like, oh, Belle Fourche is so safe. There's never anything that's going to happen to us. And the cops are having to go around and they're having to knock on everybody's door and get the Ring doorbell footage. And you have like me, who I shouldn't even admit this online, but I'm like, I'm too cheap to pay for the service. So I can't go back. If I didn't see it right then and there, it didn't happen. Right. So you have those people. And then you have people who are like, I'm not giving you anything, no matter what happened. And then you have the other person who's like, I don't know how to log into this. This is my husband's and he's out of town for the week. Like, so now you have these cops who are taking 2 to 3 days to try to
Mhm.
see if there's any footage that they could find of this car being gone. And that person's gone for 2 days now and they're having God knows what happened to them, to those kids.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about it on the podcast. It's emotional, but it's like God knows what's happening to them. Whereas if we do have some sort of camera system where as long as there's checks and balances, the cops can be like, log in.
Mhm.
This happened 5 minutes ago, find that car, and then we have a camera system that is tracking that vehicle, and we can catch them before they even hit some
Yeah.
apartment in Spearfish or wherever they're headed. And we can bring that kid home in 20 minutes versus 20 days. What impact would that make on our entire community?
Yeah.
Because I'll be honest with you, like this little boy, or well, he's not a little boy to me, but the Burns boy who just died in a car accident.
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
on Saturday, well, it was two, what, 7, 8 days ago, 2 Saturdays ago. Um, his funeral was here. Half the town showed up. This is our community.
Yeah.
What if that happened to a child in our community? Would you have the same feeling about reallocating some budget that was already budgeted for if that saved your friend's child or
Mhm.
your child?
Mhm.
And like that's how I think about it. So like initially I went in there very not happy about the situation. And then you take a step back and you think about the world that we're in,
Yeah.
whether we like it or not. This is the world that we're in. This is like the crime and the stuff that happens on our back door. And it's like if we can save any of the kids in our community from, needing therapy for the rest of their life because some tragic accident happened to them, or maybe they never come home. To me, that's a small drop in the bucket on a
Yeah.
city budget.
Well, and what you're really going into naming without really naming is your decision making process.
Yeah.
And you're touching on values that
Yeah.
guide that process. And so walk us through what are those values that guide your decision making process? Because you're saying, look, fiscal responsibility is it's amazing.
Yeah.
And also, you know, safety. And I'm putting all of these other values in this
Yeah.
community in there to inform my decision. Walk us through some of those values.
Well, I will say honestly, like I rely on just really research and discernment for one. But yes, we need to be fiscally responsible. I am a young family. I'm raising 3 kids active in sports. I paid the same property taxes as everybody else, and
Right.
I can't afford to have my property taxes go up again. So I don't want to be overspending on silly things. I do also think that safety is a huge concern.
Mhm.
all over the United States. Like, yes, anyone who has ever lived in Belle Fourche for more than 5 years knows that we are 10 years behind the rest of the country. But think about what was 10 years ago happening when I lived in Jacksonville, Florida. Yes, we are not having helicopters and drive-by shootings and things like that in Belle Fourche, but it doesn't mean that it's not coming or it's
Right.
close, you know?
Right.
So safety is a huge, huge concern to me. And especially where a lot of that budget, because and I don't have all the specific figures in my head right now, so I'm gonna ballpark it. But essentially, like, wasn't it 165,000 was already coming from what was budgeted at the police department? And then there was 50,000 budgeted for the next 3 years, so there's another 150. So now we're up to 310, right? And then so there was a little bit extra to be taken care of, and there was grant opportunities for that. So it's like that was already budgeted, so that's a safety concern to me,
Mhm.
and that should be priority. Like, keeping our citizens safe and sound is a huge priority.
Yeah.
The roads suck. I'm not gonna say they don't,
Right.
but here's the thing, like, we were kinda stagnant in growth for
Mhm.
so long in Belle Fourche that we just didn't really have a ton of the revenue to be spending
Mhm.
on streets, and streets, unfortunately, are so expensive. So, like, one of the first things I wanted to do when I get elected, I'm just gonna speak it out there into the universe that I'm winning.
Manifest.
Manifest that shit, right? But yeah, so the roads are a huge concern.
Mhm.
They're very expensive. So the first thing that I wanna do is I want to get into the weeds on our budget and say, "Okay, this is what we get for property taxes." And we know that the vast majority of that goes to the schools.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's not you can't even touch the roads with that. And then so this is what's left over to run our entire city. So this is what we could allocate to roads. This is what we have to have bare minimum to keep our city running. So this is what's left over that we could put into
Yeah.
roads. And how many years are we going to have to save up to be able to do that 2 block project that everybody wants
Mm.
done?
Mm.
And I'm not here to talk bad about any of our past council members or mayors or anything like that. But this stuff all takes a lot of planning, a lot of budgeting, and a lot of time and a lot of money.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, yes, it would have been fabulous if we could have done it all 10 years ago before prices went bonkers.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, this is the shoe that we have right now.
Yep.
So we need to figure out how to make it fit.
Yeah. Yes, and I love that. I'm sure everybody's gonna eat it up because roads, small towns
Yeah.
are just aging infrastructure.
Yeah.
Like you've said, 10 years behind. We were 10 years behind 30 years ago.
Hmm.
So the fact that we've not caught up
Yeah.
is unfortunate. And I'm hearing like this opportunity to use like maybe technology in really smart ways so that
Hmm.
we are proactive and not reactive.
Right.
But we've got this aging infrastructure. We do, roads and sidewalks are a huge concern. And quite honestly, they're a very visible government output.
Yeah. Makes you
Is-
think about it every time you drive on that and your
Exactly.
car gets, a little ding
Right?
on it. And you're like, dang it, this city sucks.
Right, and that's a great like
Yeah.
point
Yep.
there is that it's since it's such a visible government output, then when somebody sees the same crack in the sidewalk or the same pothole that's been there for 6
Yeah.
months, that gets, translated up into, well, if this hole sucks now, that must mean that the people, the leaders
Right.
suck
Right.
and that they're not doing their job. And, I love that you touched on, infrastructure planning takes time. We
Yeah.
have processes in place where we have to put out bids. You have to do, sometimes there's environmental studies, sometimes
Yeah.
there's all of these other little things that take time in there. And unfortunately, in Bell, sometimes we have to hire out
Yeah.
for that. And so we're also at other people's construction
Yep.
schedules. Winter, we've been blessed with a very mild winter
This year.
this
Yeah.
year. I'm terrified for fire season,
Right.
but that isn't always the case.
That's
And
true.
so weather can frequently derail us. And so, it is this dance between like how do we support long-term infrastructure plans
Yeah.
with meeting the immediate constituents' frustrations. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts on that?
Well, and I think the city's making some good steps there. Having that asphalt milling machine to start to at least kind of help with some of these potholes because maybe we don't have the budget for a $10 million road project, but maybe we do have the budget to go
Yeah.
through and fix 6 or 8 potholes.
Yeah.
So maybe we could do that. And I realize it's a band-aid to the situation and we don't necessarily want band-aids, but sometimes a band-aid is necessary
Right.
because you can't get to the ER for stitches. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you just have to pivot and work with what you have and work within your financial budget and financial, same word. Your budget and your financial constraints. So I think that the city's doing a good job thinking proactively about using some technology so that we can at least appease
Mhm.
until we can figure out how to get those long-term projects done. Because the last thing that I would want is for our city rushing into something
Mhm.
and making a bad choice that's gonna end up costing us 3 times the amount in the end, where we
Yeah.
have to then rip that road up in 3 years when in reality we could have possibly, just waited an extra year and had it done the right way
Yes.
and been a better servant of our taxpayer
Yeah.
dollars.
Yes, I love that. I am a huge proponent of doing things right on the front end, which
Yeah,
means putting all of the work on the front end so that we're not in what I call damage control on the
right.
back end. And so you're touching on this phrase that we're dancing around in. It's like fiscal responsibility.
Yeah.
Like it feels good coming off the lips, but like what does that mean? What does that mean to you? And I think about fiscal responsibility like one in the present moment, but then what you said, which is like, why would we tear up a road 3 years from now if we just
Mhm.
waited a year, right? So I'm hearing it in there's a fiscal responsibility in the short term and then a long-term idea of fiscal responsibility. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think, obviously roads are a huge concern. So here's the difference, the safety concern, because it's not being put in our face every day of this is what's happening. I think the safety is one of those things that's out of sight, out of mind. So people
Mm,
are like, why are we spending money on safety? We don't need to do this because they don't see it. Whereas
right.
they ride on the roads every day
Yes.
and they see those potholes every day. So I think that's why most people just subconsciously associate that as being a bigger problem in our community. But I think what we need to do is really take a step back, evaluate our road systems and our sewer, our water, and all of those things, and figure out long term what we can do to try to make a bigger impact. So this is kind of going off the rail, and I don't know enough about this where I should probably even be speaking about it, especially on like a public platform. But it's just something that's in the back of my mind,
Hmm.
and so I haven't made a decision. I haven't anything yet, but this is kind of just where my mind is going. Um, they were talking about having to do the new well and how that we would have to raise
Feet. Hmm.
water fees to be able to accommodate that. And I don't know because I have not done enough research on this, so don't take this as a grain of salt. Take it for what it is. But I'm like, okay, so if we need that pump house and we're talking about raising this, and then we are going that route because we can't qualify for a grant unless we're charging X amount of dollars. But if we know we're going to also need that other pump house in the next 5 years, let's really take a step back and think if we do raise it to this and then we can get the grants,
Hmm.
why would it make sense to raise it to this here and then this here in another couple years and then this here in another couple years when we could do that and fix the whole whammy up front? It just might take us an extra year of being able to figure it out and work through those details and things like that. And I think this is where people sometimes misunderstand me is because, like, right now I'm just kind of speaking out
Sure.
loud. I haven't made a decision yet.
Right.
I'm just thinking through options. And some people will read those things online and say, "Oh, she just wants to increase our water bill by $25 a month." And I'm like, "That is not what I said."
Right.
I'm working through thought processes so that we can have those discussions and pull in the experts from the right departments because I am not a water expert.
Right.
I am not a road expert. I can have ideas and think about how we could maybe
Hmm.
try to do it. And I think this is why you need to be able to sit down in a room and not be hot headed.
Hmm.
You don't want your top to fly off during these conversations because that's what they are. They are conversations so that we can learn from each other and talk to the experts and come up with a really good game plan and ask the right questions without blowing
Yeah.
our lid because we're not going to accomplish anything at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this value of yours to speak things out loud. And to not always have the answers up front,
Yeah.
right? But you're not going to get the answers if you don't at least say something
And
out
have
loud.
that conversation. And, we've had these conversations before how we can be on the polar opposite ends of what we agree, even as people,
Yeah.
or, whether it's politics or faith or whatever that might be.
Hmm.
But you have to be able to sit down when you get into government and you get into politics. You have to be able to sit down and have a conversation with somebody who maybe has a very polar opposite viewpoint as you
Yeah.
and be able to just have those good conversations to come to some sort of a middle ground to have a topic. And that's kind of why I love that city council is nonpartisan
Yeah.
because it's like it doesn't matter who you are, what you think in your personal life, you're not running for you specifically, you're running for your community.
Right.
And so you need to be able to sit down and have conversations with people in that community because even in Ward 2, we have Democrats, we have Republicans, we have social people who believe in socialism, we have, people who believe we should spend all the money in the world, and then you have some people who are like, "Oh, no, don't spend a dime," and then you have some people who are like, "Give this away for free," and some people who are like, "Oh, no, don't give anything away for free." So you have to be able to have those conversations, and again, keep a level head so that you can talk through those and come up with those solutions because I have people will call it flip-flopping. I completely disagree.
Right.
I will have my decision made, but yet I might have a conversation with you and you bring up 17 really valid points that I didn't even think about. And I'm like, holy cow, you just brought up so many good points. And I have changed my vote on several topics before in the past because
Mhm.
people have brought up very valid
Mhm.
concerns. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So initially I thought this way, but once I was presented with new information and talked to this expert or this expert,
Mhm.
this is why I've changed my mind.
And I think that is such an underrated value of listening,
Yeah.
of taking in new information, like really taking it in
Yeah.
and not just being like, nope, sorry, my mind's already made up. You
Yeah.
cannot convince me otherwise, right? Like that doesn't serve anyone.
No, that's the biggest way to stall a project or a community or anything and
Yeah.
and turn us into a ghost town.
Yeah. So I love this because one of the phrases that I see online on the social media, or I've even heard, and I know you've heard this too, is you don't listen.
Yeah.
And I laugh because when I hear this from my clients, like when my parents are bringing this up and they're saying this about their kids and they're like, they don't listen. I will immediately go, are they deaf? I'm sorry, I didn't know.
Right.
I didn't know. And they're like, no. And I'm like, oh, okay. So it's
Yeah.
not that. Thank God. But it's not that I'm deaf or you're deaf or anybody is, but it's that you didn't do what I wanted you to do. You didn't
Right.
make the decision. You didn't make the vote the way I wanted you to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's, like, such a difficult spot is, like, how do we balance listening, taking in information, especially from the community,
Mhm.
where they might not even have all of the information
Yeah.
themselves to really
Yep.
have their ideas, and then balance that with, like, these longer term needs of the community.
Yeah.
The short term needs, I've heard you say this a couple of times, we're 10 years behind, but then also people are like, "Don't spend any money on anything." And it's like, "No, growth is happening.
Yeah.
Like, how do we do this? How do we take in the information now, but also balance that with, like, the long-term thinking?"
Right.
So
And that's another thing that I kinda get a lot of flack for is they're like, "Oh, you want Belle Fourche to blow up and be super big because you're a realtor, and so you're going to benefit from this." And I'm like, "Okay, let's pull the stats and find out how many transactions I actually do in Belle Fourche, um,
mhm,
to my competitors." And I have great competitors in this community, don't get me wrong, we
yes.
have a lot of good agents here. But it's like, no, that's not it. But I also understand from my background and I'm just gonna maybe I've never even talked to you about this, but this is kind of how I equate property taxes
Mhm,
to try to help people understand. To where I think it's broke down into an easier to understand
yeah,
format. Okay. So I'm gonna use the Ridgeview subdivision as an example. And I'm pulling these numbers right out of the sky. So I did not look this up ahead of the podcast. I didn't know we were gonna talk about this. It just kind of
yeah,
got on a tangent here. So let's look at property taxes. Okay. So there's that Ridgeview lot where they
mhm,
are going to be putting in, I think, 45 homes roughly. Um, and right now, let's just say that's raw vacant land. And so that parcel of land, which is a fairly small area,
right,
let's just say they're maybe paying like 12 or $1,500 a year in property taxes. Okay. So then you have a developer come in and they put in the infrastructure, which then gets signed over to the city. They typically put in the park, which then gets signed over to the city. So now those are benefits that the city has. Okay.
mhm,
On top of that, you have now 45 homes in there instead of zero. Those 45 homes, I can just tell you because I looked at my property taxes the other day. Um, we're just going to ballpark it at $2,500 a year per house. So $2,500 a year times 45 homes. That's the revenue that you'll then get from taxes off of that same parcel that you were only getting like 12 to $1,500 for.
Right.
So now you've, 20x, 40x your sales tax revenue.
Right.
Now, this is where I battle with this because I'm like, I grew up in a town where I didn't have to wait for more than 2 damn cars to get through that intersection, and now I had to wait for 7, and I'm pissed. And so you'll hear me oftentimes, I joke around and I'm like, "Well, I'm gonna have to move to Newell now. Belle's getting too busy for me." But I love our community though, and
Yeah.
there's pros and cons to it though.
Yeah.
So a pro is getting more sales or property tax revenue coming in,
Right.
okay? A con is that there's going to be people inevitably who will move to our community that you may not align with and you may not agree with. There's going to be more traffic. There's going to be larger kids in the classroom.
Right.
So like there's good and bad that comes from growth, and that's the beautiful thing about Belle Fourche. Do I want it to turn into some big city? No, when I left here, I was like, I hate this town. I'm never moving back. I want to live in a big city where nobody's all up in my business. And then I moved to a big city and I was like, you know what? That small town with those values is not so bad.
Yeah.
This is where we're going to go back to raise our kids because I feel like, and I always tell my friends in bigger cities, I'm like, I'm like raising 80s babies here.
Yeah.
Like I can just let them go to the park.
Yeah.
And I love that. That's one of my favorite things about our community. So I don't want to see that go away.
Right.
That was the whole reason I moved back.
Right.
So we have to grow, but we have to
Mhm.
grow gracefully.
Yeah.
We don't want to blow up and be some big city, but we don't want to turn into a ghost town because we have infrastructure that doesn't work for people,
Right.
because we have schools that are not big enough to help or to accommodate families moving to the area,
Mhm.
or we don't have jobs here. Like
Right.
those are all things, and I think a lot of people don't realize how much work and how much balance goes into keeping everything afloat on the back end,
Yes.
because you don't want some giant business to come in here because we don't have the housing for them or the school for them.
Right.
So if you brought in a business here who needed 500 employees, we don't have 500 houses on the market for those people. We don't even have 200 houses. We don't even have 50 houses on the market for those people. So that's where, like, I think people initially, when you see those posts online and you're like, hey, if you could have any business in Belle Fourche, what would it be? And someone's like, Target. I'm like, we can't do that
Right.
because then we will be Rapid. Do you want to move into Rapid? No, it's too big and there's too much crime. Okay, then you don't want Target either,
Right.
because you have to have that balance. And so it's like just honestly having those conversations with people and being that safe space for them to come. Cause I'm not going to be like, oh my God, you're an idiot. You
Right.
want Target here?
Right.
But it's like, hey, did you think about this? Because Target will only come to a community who has X amount for population.
Mhm.
So the reality is, do you want your small town values or do you want your big city, uh, what am I trying to call it? Amenities,
Convenience. Yeah.
convenience,
Yeah.
amenities. Yeah. Things like that. So it's again, back to the transparency. It's having those
Yes.
conversations.
Well, and I love this example because I will say that too is, Belle Fourche is classically thought of as like a bedroom
Uh-huh.
community.
Yeah.
You this is just where you live, but you work somewhere else. And so I love this conversation about how do we grow,
Yeah.
because we have to grow out of that culture of just being a bedroom community.
Yep.
But I also, I think Spearfish is amazing, but I
Yeah.
don't always want to outsource everything to Spearfish.
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
want to, on the day of my most leisure, which is incidentally a Sunday, when I can walk and spend money, I want to go to my local downtown Main Street businesses and restaurants,
Yeah.
and I want to pour into that. I don't want to necessarily drive to Rapid
Right.
or Spearfish. But at the same time, like, I don't also want a Target. I don't really want a big box store. I want our, Pearsons and our yeah,
Mom and pop
and our
shops.
and
Yeah.
our, the Prairie Hills Pharmacy. I want those things. We want to
Yeah.
go into those places
Like,
in
I'm
there.
so grateful we don't have a Starbucks.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that turns a lot of people off. They're
Yeah.
like, "What, you don't even have a Starbucks?" I'm like, "Nope, but we have Wild Magnolia, and that's 10
Exactly.
times better."
Exactly. And so I love this conversation because I think, one of the things that I know was a passion for me, when I chose to run,
Mhm.
was how do I think about supporting this entrepreneurial spirit that thrives in this world that we have today. Technology can be amazing for that.
Yeah.
But then also, supporting it with just the right amount of encouragement and growth, And I love that you also touched on kind of like there's some businesses I want to be cautious of.
Yeah,
I want to be cautious of certain levels of growth.
yeah.
And so, what do you think? How do you think our community or the city could better serve, maybe, fostering more entrepreneurial development, and fostering more small business?
Yeah, so a lot of people don't realize this, but right here in the Economic Development Building, this office that we are sitting in right now, this is almost like a hub.
Yeah.
So this is a great space for somebody because rent is very expensive nowadays. Buying a commercial building is very expensive. So I don't think a lot of people realize that you can come in and rent these little offices for not a lot of
Yeah.
money to help get
Mm,
started in
yes.
entrepreneurship.
Yes.
So, like right now, as soon as I can get a commercial building, I will be out of here and then this space will open up for someone else to start that
Yeah.
next process,
I
right?
love the incubator space.
Yeah, yeah. And so that has helped a lot of people get started in our communities. As far as the council and what they could do, I've actually had a lot of good conversations. And this isn't necessarily for entrepreneurship, but one thing that I saw plaguing our community is one, there's not enough housing.
Mm,
Property taxes are a huge concern for a lot of people.
mhm.
And, people going to college are having a hard time with a spot for their kids to stay at BH.
Right.
So I get calls on this all the time. I don't even deal with rentals, but I get calls on it all the time. And so I had talked to the city and I said, "Hey, this is something that I saw in other communities, and I was wondering if we could bring it here." And they were like, "Well, what is it?" And I said, "Well, what about doing like an ADU, which is an accessory
Mhm.
dwelling unit in the backyard, where you could put a small unit in the backyard. So your aging parents could live back
Yes.
there. Your college kid could live back there. You could rent it out to a college kid or an aging parent or something like that and help cover your property taxes." And the city was like, "Yeah, we can do that." Like there's nothing in the ordinances saying that you cannot do
Right.
that. But I don't think a lot of people knew that in
Right.
our community. It's very big and it happens a lot in the bigger communities that I've lived in, but
Mhm.
I don't think people thought little old Belle Fourche could do something like
Yeah.
that. And so again, that's getting that information out there to be able to help our people. So that's kind of back to the transparency thing.
Mhm.
Again, they weren't trying to hide it from us, but they were like, I didn't realize that people would want this.
Well, and I
You
think
know?
and I think that goes to, so many things come up in here is, you said it earlier, "Don't tell me what to do," right?
Yeah.
And so that really comes
Yeah.
up because people want to protect, their
Mhm.
right, to do things, and then I can almost hear some of the, criticisms of
Mhm.
that as, "Well,
Yeah.
you're just trying to squeeze more money from me, and you're just trying to do whatever." But I love this, thinking kind of outside the box
Yeah.
of, you know, uh, being entrepreneurial. Like, how do I, as a stay-at-home mom, maybe, kind of supplement the income in the house and pay the property taxes? Well, if I have an EDU, I can rent that out. Or even better, if my parents are aging, I really want to keep them close.
Yeah.
So many
Let them
other
pay you
options.
rent. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a lot of different options out there that people can do. Um, and I mean, side hustles is where I kind of started.
Yeah.
So I've been in banking and bookkeeping and the corporate world for a long time. And I was told to stop having children after my second one. I had a medical scare and they were like, don't get pregnant for at least a year. And I said, I wasn't supposed to be able to have kids anyways. I think that ship has sailed. I'm not worried about
Sure.
it. So we decided to move back to Rapid. I went back to corporate America and I won't name the employer, but I was on my maternity leave and
Hmm.
Arrow had to have a full mouth surgery that morning at 6:30. And they told me at 8:30 I had to come in for a meeting. And I said, "But I'm on my maternity leave and my son has
Hmm.
his surgery. Can you record it? I'll watch a replay, whatever."
Hmm.
They were like, "If you want to work this season, then you'll find a way to come to this meeting." And I just remember it like almost in tears. And anyone who knows me knows I'm like not a crier. So like, maybe once, maybe twice a year if
Right.
someone close to me dies, I might cry. But I just remember getting so emotional and looking at my husband and saying like, "What the heck are we gonna do?"
Right.
And he goes, "Well, honey, how much do you pay after or how much do you make after we pay daycare?" I said, $300. And he goes, "You bring home $300 after working 40 hours a week," because my husband doesn't pay the bills.
Right.
Um, and I was like, "Yeah, I bring home about $300 after we pay daycare and all this." And he goes, "So you're leaving the house for 40 hours a week, putting our kids in daycare after school, and then we're gonna put the newborn in daycare for you to make $300 a month?" I was, "Yep, that's the way that our society is right
Right.
now."
Right.
Um, And so he was like, "Well, is there anything you can do from home to make $300 a month?" Sure enough, started my social media marketing company on my maternity leave and had what double my income to the point that we ended up actually having to hire a nanny to come into our house and do that kind of stuff because I was
Mhm.
able to grow the business that
Yeah.
quickly. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities out there. I just
Yes.
don't think people know where to find
I
those opportunities and that help and stuff
right.
like that. And that's kind of one of those things I've just really been passionate about in our community is like if you have an idea,
Mhm.
um let's have coffee
Yes.
because literally there was someone who was just like, "Hey, so I'm a stay-at-home mom. I have this idea." And I was like, "How can we make it bigger and better for you?"
Yes. Yes.
And so we sat down and we had coffee for 3 hours, and we talked about how she could do, like, a subscription service and all this stuff to
Mhm.
grow her business. And so those are things that I'm just kinda passionate about, and so
Yeah.
I think that, just being on council will give me a better understanding of even more than
Mhm.
I'm able to see as just, your normal citizen on the back end,
Yeah.
and just to be able to help those people and kinda, uh, bridge those gaps a little bit because I had always said, like, when I grow up and I've made it, okay, for lack of a better term. I'm like, I just wanna be that connector.
Yeah.
I wanna be able to connect to the right people. So be like, "Oh, you're here. This is what you wanna do. I need you to talk to this person, this person, this person, this person, and that's how we're gonna make your dream a reality."
Yeah.
Whether it's starting a new business,
Mhm.
whether it's, trying to help your aging mom be able to get here. Like, I just want to be able to help our community in that aspect, and I can do it the bigger the role I'm in, the bigger help I can be back
Right.
for our community.
Yes. Oh, I love that. And I just feel that this community in particular is so ripe. I mean, there are
Yeah.
so many people with so many great ideas.
Mhm.
The energy is here. There's just so much for that. And having the right connections and having the right, like, maybe even models of what that is. So like, oh, I see Felina has done this. Oh, that's
Yeah.
that. I mean, if Felina can do it, I think I can do
Well, and that's what I tell
it.
people all the time. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, if any of you knew what I was like when I was 18 years old to what I am now," I'm like, "If I can flip the script and do this,
Yes.
so can all of you."
Yeah.
And I just hope that I can be that beacon of light for people to say like, "Hey, just because you made a bad choice doesn't mean that you're a
Mhm.
bad person." And people can grow and change and they can make big impacts. And
Yes.
my son had a soccer coach one time and he grew up in Detroit and he was very involved in the gangs and stabs and stabbings and
Mm,
very violent crimes. And him and I have had a lot of talk and he's counseled me a lot on some of the decisions that I've made to get involved in the community. And I will say that I think sometimes people who have had a rougher past or who have
mm,
walked through some
mhm,
very big challenges
mhm.
sometimes come out to be the biggest proponents of community and
Yeah.
outreach. And seeing what he went through and the impacts that he makes, and he's got, 10, 20 years on me. I don't know how old he is, but he's got a lot of time on me. And I'm like, I need to start today so
Yeah.
that in 10 or 15 years, I can be where he is. Like, I can write that check for
Mhm,
$100,000 back to our community. And so,
mhm.
like, these are just solid steps that I'm taking in our community now to set myself up to be able to make a bigger impact later on in
Yeah.
life.
And I love that you're starting to go somewhere that is one of my favorite places to go. And so we'll just make the leap. Is, um we get inundated with national politics,
Yes.
and those are things that are, like, so lofty and, like, way up here, and they don't even touch us, but, like, the local stuff,
Yeah.
city council, this is the roads we drive on, this is the
Yep.
sidewalks, this is our dinner table.
Yeah.
So the decisions kind of made at this local level impact our day-to-day life. And
Yep.
so tell me about, like, what does that mean to you? Like, you've already been a very active, very active in civic engagement, I
Yeah.
would say. But what does that mean to you to take that step up and to say, like, I really want to be in these practical day-to-day decision makings and inform myself, my community, my ward
Hmm.
too, but then also, like, how do I help my community grow?
Yeah. Well, and I will say, I had a good conversation at the soccer fields this last weekend, and somebody was like, "Why are you getting into this? You already do so much. Why would you put one more thing on your plate?" And I looked at him and I said, "You know what? I said, "I've had this mindset for the last decade, and it was when you have more than what you need, build a larger table, not a taller fence."
Yeah.
And so I have lived by that mindset for the better part of the last decade. And so I think getting involved in city council, and when I say having more of what you need, it doesn't mean a monetary
Right.
thing. I have a lot of knowledge that I can use to help people.
Mhm.
I've lived in various communities. I've seen what works, I've seen what doesn't work. So if I can stop something bad from happening in
Mm.
our community because I saw it happen in another community, or not stop it because I'm one person. So I don't want anyone thinking I'm going in on an agenda. I don't have anything
Right.
to do. But like if I'm saying, and I'm just going to use a prime example of a little town that I started my real estate business in. Um, it was a huge, huge tourist town. And kind of what we saw happen over COVID happened down there. And it was a pretty impoverished area. So they had all free lunches for school, free
Mhm.
breakfast, everything like that to tell you kind of like where the mind or the monetary value was. And then COVID hit.
Mhm.
And then they had very, very lax Airbnb policies.
Oh, yes. Oh.
And so almost every citizen in that community was forced out.
Mhm.
And it basically turned into a bunch of cash buyers coming up to
Yeah.
buy Airbnbs, and that community, it's falling apart. I
Yeah.
mean, and it's hard for me to watch that from here because while I wasn't a local to that community, I came in and I did the same thing down there I do here. I immersed myself in the community.
Right.
I got involved and I was embraced with open arms and I was treated like one of the locals,
Yes.
you know? So to see all of those locals losing their livelihood,
Mhm.
their businesses, their jobs because they opened up the door for these big companies to come in and buy
Mhm.
up all the land, and then a hurricane hit, and then they came in and they screwed people out of their
Yeah.
houses and stuff like this.
Yeah.
There's documentaries of similar instances. Um, so that happened, and I'm like, so if I walked through that in another community, why wouldn't I just share that knowledge with the
Right.
rest of
Yes.
council and with the rest of the community and be like, hey, I saw this situation
Mhm.
happen. I just want you to think about that
Yeah.
before you consider a new ordinance
Right.
or amending an ordinance or something like that. So I just feel that I'm young enough to still have an open mind.
Mhm.
I'm old enough to have the wisdom
Mhm.
and to have lived through scenarios in life that I can make a huge impact at the
Yeah.
city council.
When I hear you share that story, I'm reminded of what I saw happen in Denver.
Yeah.
A very similar explosion. Everybody had Airbnbs. They bought up the houses. Now there's the housing shortage. Now there's no affordable housing.
Yep.
And then they had to go back and redo ordinances, and now you have to live in the unit, and I think that that wisdom is very, very helpful. But what I'm also hearing you name and that I really wanna highlight is, like, hey, like, that didn't that community didn't think about how to protect their community.
Right.
They didn't think about how to protect the little guy, and what I'm hearing you saying there is, like, a little bit more thought on the front end. We can actually really be thoughtful for our community and be intentional.
Yeah. And honestly, like that's my biggest fear is, many people who have watched us, my husband and I over the last 20 years, we've moved away several times. If anyone asks me why, I can tell you it was lack of jobs.
Yeah.
And I don't want my kids to have to leave this community because they can't find work here.
Right.
I don't want my kids, my dad, why do you keep moving back to Florida? I'm like, because there's jobs and I can still buy a 3 bedroom, 2 bath house for $80,000.
Yeah.
And that's obviously not the case now that
Right.
COVID hit and stuff. But I was like, so it's kind of a no-brainer,
Yeah.
and I don't ever want people who love our community to have to leave because they A, don't have a job or B, can't afford a house
Right.
here.
Yes.
And so if I'm going on any quote unquote agenda, it's to help our community members to be able to
Right.
stay in our
Yeah.
communities without having to leave and not wanting to leave. I mean, if you want to leave, I wish you the best. I was dead set on I was never gonna live in this community again when I was a naughty, raunchy kid, but I hope you do leave, and I hope that you realize what you have because, like, we had kinda talked about how when I get beat up online or
Yeah.
when people on Facebook are so negative and reactive, it's like, you're right, but at the same time, if you don't know the bad side, how can you appreciate the good?
Right.
And so the people who appreciate the good in our community, I want them to be able to stay here.
Yes.
The people who hate our community, I want them to leave to experience life outside of Belle Fourche to see, hey, it wasn't as bad as I
Right.
thought it was. It was actually pretty dang
Right.
good,
Right.
you know?
And I love this again. You're kind of uh dancing around a topic that I love that we get these like little segues and I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna go for it. Okay. Because I think, you as a business owner and then um get put into this category of the, "It must be so nice"
Oh, yeah.
category, right? And so what it also is, and I think this leads into, being in city council or even in city employment, is the good old boy
Oh,
club.
yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, what have you learned in this process that maybe you can help educate people on
Mhm.
the myth of the good old boy club, as well as like what they might misunderstand about being on city council? What can we really do? What can we not do? How much do we really have? Because we have rules to follow.
Mhm.
We have to put out bids. We can't just get somebody's bid and put away these other ones. Like
Yeah.
there's things to follow. So tell me, like, as this business owner who has probably gotten the, "It must be nice, you must be part of the good old boy club," tell me how you hope to kind of, validate the myth, not validate the myth, but
Yeah.
validate the concerns that created the myth, but also bust that myth down.
Yeah, and I will say, like, it's kinda tough because I do think you do have your groups of people,
Mhm.
but I think it kinda depends on where you're at
Yeah.
to what you think that that is the good old boys club.
Right.
Because I've been told that I'm part of the good old boys club, and I'm like, "Well, can you sign me up for those perks?" Like, because I obviously missed the memo on, like, getting all of the business from that or
Right.
whatever that might be, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes people think that you're part of the good old boy club because you just got involved in a lot of different things, and they're like, "Oh, there's just one person making all these decisions."
Mhm.
And it's
Mhm.
like, "Please step up," because I would love to spend more time with my family.
Right.
And every board that you sign up for is one I don't have to do
Yeah.
because they need people,
Yeah.
right? So I feel that if anyone is worried about there being a good old boy club, I encourage them to step up and get involved.
Yeah.
Because even on council, we've talked about votes. And so like I always tell people when they ask me, they're like, well, are you going to vote for what I want? And I'm like, not necessarily.
Right.
I might not even vote for what I want.
Right.
Because here's the thing, I'm not there on my own personal agenda. I'm not there on your agenda. I'm there for the whole ward too,
Right.
you know? So there's
And the city at large
yeah, and the
in
city at
there.
large, yeah.
Yeah.
So I always like we're a little packet, we're just Ward 2. But yes, you're on city council for the betterment of the entire city. And quite honestly, I hate to say just the city
Right.
because the people in the county
Mhm.
also come in. So
Yes.
excuse me, that's one thing that I just don't really like about our local government is that like the county can't even vote on that. When in reality, the county still comes in and spends a lot of money downtown.
Right.
And they still have to drive on our roads and they still have to do this. So I'm going to listen to them just like they were in my ward.
Right.
So if they want to call and complain to me or call and tell me something, hey, it'd be really nice, anyone, if you call and say something that somebody's doing really good. Okay. I know everybody calls and complains when things go wrong, but
Right.
it would be nice for you to reach out to a council person who you thought did a good job at the last meeting or a board member who you thought went
Mhm.
above and beyond. Just throwing
Yes.
that out there. Anyways, back
Agreed.
to topic. um, I don't know. I lost my train of thought on that. But I think it would just be really important for people to understand where that vote is coming from.
Right.
And so, like, this might not be popular, and I might have to wait until orientation to figure out if this is even good or bad. But I told people, I said, if I ever vote on a touchy subject, I want to say I'm voting no because, or I'm voting yes because.
Mhm.
And I don't know if the mayor will cut me off on that or not, but I think it's important. And that's why I also went back to the Facebook group because I'm like, if I can't articulate that, I
Yeah.
want to be able to go back on my Facebook page and say, I realize this may not have been the vote that everybody
Mhm.
wanted, but this is why I voted that way. I had 72 emails that came in that said they wanted it voted this way, and I had 2 people call me saying that they didn't.
Right.
You know what I mean? So again, I wanna just be able to bridge that gap.
Yes.
But at the same time, that's why we have 8 council people.
Yes.
We have 4 different wards, 2 people from each ward, okay? And that's smart, and we've talked about this before. I said, "I think we need a balance. We need the wiser people who've been around forever
Mhm.
to help kinda, guide and not train, that's a wrong word, but,
I
counsel.
I think it comes more into the, like, kind of the way you described your, whimsy sense of, like, going into the world and, like, having all these ideas, and then your
Yeah.
husband is like, "Whoa, come back to her."
Yes, yes. So
Right?
we need to bridge that gap, and we need more people like in my age generation. So we've got the
Yes.
wisdom. We've lived through 20 years of being an adult. Okay? Because I'm 40, or I'll be 40. To hold on to that 39 as long as I can. But I've got 20 years of living in the real world.
Yeah.
So I'm not old enough to be out of touch with raising children and trying to
Yes.
figure out how to make the mortgage payment and trying to do this. But I've got that 20 years of real life experience with me too. So personally, I think that around the age of 40 is like the perfect time for people to
Yeah.
start jumping in. And we're that weird family. I have a 6-year-old at home
Yeah.
all the way up to 14. Friends of mine, their kids are already graduated and
Yeah.
gone to
Yeah.
college. And then I also have maybe some younger friends who have, all 2 and 3-year-olds.
Right.
So I'm kind of in that weird
Mhm.
spot where like I've got friends on both ends that I'm hearing this complaint from the new mom who's still in got their kids in diapers. I'm hearing the complaints of the mom who's got their kid going off to college, and then there's me somewhere in the middle.
Right.
And then that's not even counting all the clients that I talk to on a daily
Right.
basis and why they wanna come to our community or why they leave our community because they don't like it.
Right.
So, I feel like I just have so much knowledge that I could bring to council, but at the same time, I'm one person.
Mhm.
There's checks and balances in place, and so this is why it's not necessarily a good old boy club, because all 8 people on there are from all different walks
Right.
of life.
Right.
You have some who have been involved in local government for 20 years or more. And then you have some like me who are like, I'm just getting my feet wet.
Right.
Like we're just jumping in,
Freshmen included.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, I don't know how the saying came of the good old boys club.
Right.
Maybe that was just before my time. Like I said, I've been accused of being part of the good old boys club.
Mhm.
And when I ask why, I don't really get an answer
Yeah.
other than you're involved in too many things and making too many decisions that overlap. And I'm like, I get that, and I can see where people are
Mm.
coming from when they
Sure.
say that because
Sure.
that is true.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we've had an open Parks and Rec position open for months
Right.
that's not getting filled.
Right.
And now if I get elected onto city council,
There'll be one more
there will be
position.
one more position
Mhm.
open. Who's willing to step up?
Right.
So you can't sit back behind your screen and say, "Oh, you're just part of the good old boys club. You're making too many decisions." But I'm not
Right.
willing to come out from behind my computer and do it. So I just think that again, there's those conversations to be had. Why do
Mhm.
you feel that way?
Mhm.
Why do you feel there's a good old boys club?
Yes.
What do you feel we could do differently to, counterbalance that thought
Mhm.
process?
Yeah, and you're also naming too, I mean, kind of part of the charm of this small town is to have people overlapping. So
Mhm.
there's continuity. There's also consistency.
Yeah.
These are certain traits and values that people want from their small town.
Yeah.
And yet so that means, like, we have to accept, and earlier you used, like, there's good and bad, and I just think sometimes we don't even have to put it in that dichotomy.
Fair. Yeah.
There's just, like, it is this is what is most helpful, and this is just the reality of
Yeah.
being in a small town, and to your point is, when there's only a handful of people that regularly step up and step into the light, then there is that. And so I love that you kind of asked this question without asking it is who is willing to step up now?
Mhm.
Because, I think too much continuity, too much of the same thing, right, does breed stagnation.
Yeah, we need fresh faces, fresh
Yes.
minds, fresh ideas and things like that.
Yes.
So I think that's very important. And, to go back to the good old boys club or people willing to step up, here's a prime example. We have 3 open wards right now.
Hmm.
Ward 1, Ward 2, and Ward 3.
Yeah.
Ward 1, one person has turned in an this is as of yesterday. One person has turned in their petition. One petition is still out.
Yes. That is correct.
Ward 2, which is where I'm at, 3 people have turned in their petition and one is still out gathering signatures. Again, this was as of yesterday. And then Ward 3, 0. 0 petitions have
Wow.
been taken out for Ward 3.
Wow.
So, we need people to get a petition out in Ward
Yes.
3 immediately
Yes, please. Ward 3, step
because
up into the light.
well, and that's the thing is everybody's like, "Oh, he's part of the good old boys club." he got in because nobody ran against him.
Right.
Run against them. But then here no, I'm gonna go off on a tangent here. This is why they have 3-minute rules, on city council, by the way. Um, my tangent here is that you have people who want to run,
Right.
right? And so Ward 3, we have 0 people who have taken out a petition. So if one person gets elected, they're gonna be like, "Oh, he's part of the good old boys club. He just got
Mm.
in." He ran unopposed. What did you
Yeah.
expect?
Yeah.
Now, hindsight, we have 4 people running for Ward 2. 3 out of the 4 have gotten their petition in. There have already been community members asking people who have already turned in their petition to step down and
Oh,
stop running. That is wild to me.
that is wild.
You have some people complaining that people aren't getting involved, and then you have that same people saying you should step down. Do you want us to get involved or do you not want us to get
Right.
involved? Is it just because we didn't vote the way that you wanted us to that
Mhm.
time, or is it just because,
Yeah.
my light shining brighter, you
Yeah.
somehow think dims yours when in reality it's not?
Yeah.
I love the example when you take the candle
Mhm.
and you say, like, I should never let my light shine too bright because I want to make this person comfortable. Guess
Mhm.
what? This person's light isn't lit.
Yeah.
Take your bright shining light and turn it over to this candle
Mhm.
and see what happens.
Yeah.
You just lit the candle for the next person who can then use their light to light the candle for the
Yes.
next and the next and the
Yeah.
next. And I'm getting chills.
Yeah.
Whew, it's like the domino effect.
Mhm.
Why would you ever dim your
Right.
light? Because that's how the whole community's
Yeah.
light falls.
And here's, like, what's so beautiful about what you're saying is, like, you don't know when that moment is going to be for that person that you lit the candle for.
Right?
You don't know when it is that they're gonna be like, "I am stepping into this."
Yeah.
They might just be walking around because they just need to see, but then they fully embrace it, and so you don't know when that is.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, if the candle never gets lit, it never gets discovered.
Yeah, and so it really breaks my heart that there's people in our community that are discouraging people from running.
Yeah. Yeah, this makes me wanna ask you, what is it like, though, then, to stand alone on something?
That's tough.
It's scary.
Yeah, yeah. Standing alone on issues sometimes can be isolating, very
Mhm.
isolating, for lack of a better term. Um, I would say there was an instance here that happened not too long ago, where I was looking over a budget and I was just like, man, I've got to be missing something
Yeah.
because people are looking at this budget and they're like, yeah, I think that's a good idea. And I'm like, what am I missing?
Mhm.
Because I don't think that you should ever go into a budget season in a deficit.
Yeah.
Um, I think you should always hope for the best because inevitably, I don't know if any of you have ever balanced a checkbook or had to have real life scenarios, but inevitably, when you get caught up, your tire blows
Yep. Oh,
or
absolutely.
you need an engine change or something, something will come up.
Mhm.
So I always like to have that little bit in our back pocket. And that's one thing that I would bring into the city as well. If
Mhm.
if I was, in charge of any of the budgeting or any of those decision making, save for a rainy day
Mhm.
so that we aren't stuck in a bind. But where I was kind of stuck alone on this topic was I was looking at the budget and I was just like, it's not making sense to me.
Yeah.
I asked the questions and asked the questions. And I think that got and I get this online a lot too, is that, when you start asking questions, people are like, why is she being combative? Why is she so against us? And it's like,
Yeah.
no, 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 no.
Right.
I don't understand. I'm
Right.
asking the question because I don't understand.
Right,
And
but
I'm
you're just not blindly going
yeah.
along,
And I'm
and so
thinking,
the question asking is seen as a challenge, which
yeah,
is what it should be, right?
yeah.
We should be challenging
And we
the
should be
system.
doing checks and balances. Yeah, because
Yes.
we are all human. We will all make mistakes. So I think it's important to, balance that and be able to have that conversation with
Yeah.
people and then not be hurt when they get mad at you. Because, when that person came back, they were, in my opinion, a little bit snappy.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, I'm not picking fights here. Like I just don't understand it. And so I personally am thinking I've got to be missing something.
Right.
And I'm trying to figure out what I'm missing.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I ended up losing that vote, but
Mhm.
that's why we have council.
Mhm.
That's why we have board members alike. Um, I voted to not spend the extra money and I got outvoted on that.
Yeah.
But I stood true in it and I stayed the course and it felt very alone and isolating. And I honestly, I feel like I kinda lost some cool points, I guess, because I feel like people thought I was challenging them, and
Mhm.
that wasn't the case.
Mhm.
Um, and I hope that, like, people never think that of me
Yeah.
online. I know they do because I've heard it,
Right. Yeah.
some people are pretty vocal. Um, but really, I think that it's important to have questions and
Yes.
ask the conversation or have those conversations because,
Yeah.
again, how many times have you and I had a conversation? I'm like, I didn't think about that because
Yeah.
for those who are watching, um, Crystal is our council rep for Parks and Recreation, and I am the vice president on that board. So there's been times where we've had
Yeah.
conversations where I'm like, I see it differently.
Yep.
And then you're like, well, I see it this way. How did you understand that? And I'm like, well, I understood it this way. And you're like, oh, well, I understood it this way. And then we just have those conversations. And never once have we gotten heated. Never
No.
once have we, wanted to punch each other in the throat or anything
No, I
like
definitely
that.
not. And look, here we are now,
Yeah.
right?
Whoops, lost my earbud.
Yeah.
But I think it is important just to be able to have those conversations and to be willing to stand your
Yes.
ground and be willing to because I think too many people are like, "Oh, I don't wanna ruffle any feathers, so I'm just gonna
Mhm.
vote yes because that seems like the majority."
Mhm.
And that's not me. And I might be hated for that.
So
I might be
maybe
loved for
maybe
that.
maybe you're not quite as a people pleaser as you, self-proclaim to
Well,
be.
I will say I feel like I am a people pleaser because it breaks my freaking heart when somebody's mad at me about a decision that I made. But I also understand that for the better good, I have to
Right.
sometimes be the bad apple
Well
in
well, s
someone's mind.
well, and so what I hear when you say that is I can stand on principle.
Yes.
I
Yes.
don't need to stand on popularity. I can
Yes.
stand on principle.
Yeah.
And I think that is, a trait that is really important
Mhm.
to it is not pleasant to be not liked. I'm
Right.
not saying it is, but we have to be okay with that
Yeah.
because not everybody's going to like us. Not everybody's going to hate us either. There's this huge gray area.
Yeah.
We are not going to live rent free in anybody's brains for most of the time. But to be able to stand on principle and not popularity, I think is such an intrinsic value for this role.
Yeah.
And
And it's one of those things, like I said, there's gonna be times where I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna be like, God, I pissed everybody off. Nobody's gonna like me. My business is gonna fail. And then it's like, but I think it's also important to be able to have those feelings,
yes.
get those out of your system,
Yep.
have your bestie or in my case, it's my husband, be like, but it's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Like, is this going to affect your life in the next 5 minutes, 5 years, whatever
Hmm.
that may be? And if the
Hmm.
answer is no, stop stressing about it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and I love that, and I just there's been so many great things that you've shared that have really, I think, given us all a bigger glimpse into who you are and what you hope to bring to the role, and then what you hope to like. I'm almost hearing this like legacy afterwards of like I want younger people to keep coming up
I
and
do.
keep stepping
Yeah.
in, and like how can I use my experience as that legacy to like light that fire?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, and so um, I guess just, some parting words here. Like, tell the listeners why this election matters so much. And, we've seen the last elections, abysmal numbers,
Mhm.
abysmal.
Yeah.
What would be, one, why is this important? And what would be your words for inspiration to like light that fire under people?
I think honestly, and I'm pretty much talking to Ward 3 right here,
Word three, we're talking to you.
is that sometimes you have to step out of your comfort zone to truly step into who you are as
Yes.
a person. And I've been lucky enough to be surrounded by enough people in my life and in my businesses and um just in general
Yeah.
to have them encourage me to step up and step forward. And like I said, I think people, especially in my age group, we often hear we're too busy or we don't have time or this or that. And I get it. Trust me, I get it. There are some weeks that I'm going like crazy 12, 15 hours a day. I get it. We
Yeah.
all we all have the same 24 hours in the day. It's how we choose to spend those
Yeah.
that makes the difference. And then also to their mindset of they're like, "I'm not ready for this. I've never served on a board." Just so you know, you don't have to serve on a board before you run for city council.
Right.
Do I think it helps? I do. But it doesn't mean that you can't sit through orientation and, read Robert's rule on Audible and totally catch yourself up. Like you
Right.
can do it. It's just going to be step up and have the heart to lead and have that thick skin.
Yeah.
And honestly, then you need to just have your circle of people to surround yourself with so that when shit gets bad, because inevitably it's gonna happen, you're gonna piss somebody off. You're
Right.
never gonna make 100% of the people happy 100% of the time. It's not a realistic
Right.
goal.
Understood. Yeah.
Your goal is to stand true in your morals and to stand in your purpose and continue to serve your community.
Yeah.
And like I said, sometimes that's going to piss people off. Sometimes it's going to ruffle feathers, but you have to stay firm in your beliefs. And
Right.
so I'm really just hopeful that we will have more people step up. I'm really hopeful that we will have community members stop telling people to not run or that they're not ready or anything like that. But it has to be on their heart. They
Yeah.
can't run because someone said, "Oh, you should run." Like, you have to have that on your heart to serve.
Agreed.
City council is not an easy position, okay? Like, I know what I'm getting myself into. It's not gonna be easy. People are like, "Oh, it's just city council. It's twice a month." No, it's not. You also serve on several other boards,
Hmm.
and so everybody's like, "Well, then how the heck are you doing it?" Well, 2 boards I will still be able to serve on if I'm elected. 2 boards I have to put down. The mayor may or may not put me on those boards again as a city liaison. We
Yeah.
have no idea what we're going into. The mayor pretty much is the one that makes that decision on what
Yes.
other board you're gonna have to sit on. So, I just don't want people to not know what they're getting into either. It's gonna be a big
Yeah.
adjustment, and there's going to be work that has to be done, and you're
Yes.
gonna have to put in extra time in the housing studies and things like this that you're probably like, "I don't even know that." It's okay. It's okay. You will have someone hold your hand, and you will have someone to guide you and counsel you through this. You just have to get started.
Yes. I would say it's an incredibly humbling experience.
Yes.
I mean, I absolutely agree. My own experience was that I felt called. I intentionally moved back to this community and I said,
Yeah.
what can I do that is going to be the most impact? How can I really like be a part of this community in the most intentional way possible?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, city council, you
Right.
know?
Right.
I think people who do tend to have these really dreamlike goals and aspirations, need other people that are like, "Oh, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Let's bring you back to earth a little bit." And so I would say, like, I definitely came in with, like, a lot of dreams and a
Yeah.
lot of hopes, and they're not gone. It's just like, "Oh, things move a little bit differently. They move a little bit slowly. We've
Yeah.
gotta get other parts in place." But I don't think anybody shouldn't not run it, and they're
Right.
really I would say I don't necessarily have had anybody to hold my hand. It's a little baptism by fire,
Yeah.
but also, like, there's some nudges along the way of, like, "Don't don't do that. Don't do this."
Yeah.
And then you have to make some decisions of, like, "Okay, like, how can I still show up and do the work that I feel called to do
Mhm.
and not also be a doormat?"
Right. But at the same time too, if you do have a question,
Mhm.
you can call
Yep,
this person or that person
yep.
or this person. Like, just prime example, Clark is also in Ward 2. I've called him multiple times and been like, "Hey, I'm thinking about this. Does
Mhm.
that sound legit or does that
Yes.
sound terrible?" And he'll usually be like, I would caution you on that. Or maybe you should talk to this person instead because they would have a better answer for
Yeah,
you." I'm like, "Thank you."
yeah.
So just honestly, sometimes it's just knowing the right people to talk to.
Well, and you're saying just outright, like, putting the thoughts
Hmm.
out, talking about them,
Yeah.
and having somebody who has had experience like Clark has had
Yeah.
is phenomenal, that he's also willing to impart that
Yeah,
stuff
and
on
take
her.
the time to help
Mhm,
people. I mean, I've sat down with him lots of times
mhm.
to just ask simple questions that
Yeah.
or just wrap my brain around a concept or something like that, and he's not the only one.
Yeah,
There's been so many council reps that I've been able to reach out to, both current and former,
yeah,
because like I said, the only time I would encourage somebody not to run is if they're running because someone told them to.
right.
Like,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, but if your husband or your wife is telling you to run, or your parents or your kids or your employer, anything like that, I don't think you should run. You should not run unless it's on your heart to
yeah,
run and you have a specific, not an agenda because we also don't want people running on agendas,
right.
but you should want to be in that role
Yeah,
because if you don't want to be there when it gets hard, you're going to just quit.
yes, I agree.
And we've seen that happen before,
Mhm.
and I don't wanna see that happen again. I don't wanna see that happen to anyone in Ward 2.
Yeah,
Like, we've already had 2 people leave us in Ward 2 in the last year, 18 months-ish. Um,
yeah,
and I just don't wanna see that again. Like,
yeah,
I wanna see people who wanna be there because they really wanna be there, and they really wanna make an impact in our
yeah,
community.
yeah. I love that. I think that's a beautiful place for us to kind of wrap this up because I so appreciate your willingness and the invitation for me to
Yeah,
be
and
this
thank you. I
person
appreciate
in the other seat,
But who
asking the
better than
questions.
a current sitting council
Thank you.
person?
I love this. I love that we've been able to really touch on what local leadership is because it isn't just an abstract
Yeah.
term. It is the roads we drive on.
Yeah.
It is the restaurants we go to in our community. It's the shops we go in. It is the roads, the sidewalks, the parks,
Mhm.
everything in there. And so, it matters to
Yeah.
be thoughtful about this role. And I agree with you 1000%. If there's no heart in it, if you don't feel that call, that's not the place.
And I shouldn't say that they should never run, just maybe not the right time,
Right. Sure.
you
That's
know?
fair.
So, because I don't also wanna be that person that discourages
Right.
anyone, but maybe it's just the time is not right, and that's okay because we all go through walks of life at different times, different seasons, different places,
Agreed.
different journeys. No 2 people are the same. Um, so yeah, it's
Yeah.
just maybe the timeline is off.
Yeah. Well, what can the listeners expect between now and April 7th?
Oh, yes.
Um,
I am so excited. Gosh, it was such a whirlwind to get those petitions in. I had like such good ambitions to have them in by that following Monday. We were like able to pick them up Friday.
yeah.
It was February 6th. I was going to have mine turned in by Monday. But then like there was that community member who passed away and I was like, I don't feel right going door to door.
Yeah.
And then the Super Bowl was on Sunday. And I was like, I really think that people, because people need family time and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I gave myself a little bit of grace. And then I ended up being the third person to get my petition handed in, which is awesome that people were getting them handed in
Yes.
that quick. That was fabulous. But now you have until March 6th to get those petitions in. So Ward 3, I'm talking to you. You have plenty of time to still go get petitions and get those
Yes.
get those signed and sent in. I will even help you. Because we need good people who
Yes.
who have a passion for this community to run. And I'd rather help somebody get elected than
Agreed.
hinder.
Agreed.
Um, and so basically right now you're going to start seeing a lot of these candidates start speaking in forums.
Hmm.
So I know the chamber is already planning a forum for the council members.
Hmm.
So that's where the public's going to be able to come in and ask us questions and things like that. I'm going to continue my Facebook page that I have. And I've got a website already built. I was just waiting to launch all of this stuff till I got my petition handed in. So I've already got a website launched, and I have signs getting ordered today. So if any of my supporters, whether you're in Ward 2 or not, if you would like a sign in your front yard, please let me know. I'll be delivering those in the next couple of weeks. And I'm going to be really encouraging people to get out and vote. So
Yeah.
for those of you who don't know, this is a special election. So the only thing that's getting voted on in this election is ward seats 1, 2, and 3,
Correct.
if anyone runs. If nobody runs in Ward 3, they're going to be appointed. And you want to talk about a good old boy club? That's exactly what somebody's going to say is, oh, that person just got in because they're part of the good old boy club. So if you
Right.
don't want that and you're in Ward 3, I encourage you to run. Um,
Yes.
that's my very stern, get it done or don't complain voice. um, so you're going to see that. And then the election is going to be April 7th. But again, the only thing on the ballot is going to be
Hmm.
the ward seats for 1, 2, and 3. So I'm just hoping to get enough voter turnout because I'm ballparking this number out of my brain here. And I don't know for sure if it's going to be 100% accurate, but I want to say that in the last election for Ward 2, between Clark and Lee Cap, only 211
Hmm.
people
Yes.
voted, and we have over 1,000 people in Ward 2.
Yeah.
So, you can do the math on that. Like, roughly
Hmm.
20% of the people less than 20%. I think it
Right.
actually ended up being, like, 17% of active voters actually came out,
Right.
17%. It's a very low number.
Hmm.
My goal is to have at least 250 people come out for the vote. Because again, this is a special election. So I'm trying
Yes.
not to be too lofty, because it's not like you're voting for governor or anything else on this ballot. So some people don't really care to come out on a smaller election, but it's
But I
so
think that's why
important.
it's so important is because
Yeah.
this is the dinner table. This is
Yes.
this is, how we drive on the streets. This
Yep.
this impacts our day-to-day life. And I really, I mean, yeah, it's great to go vote for a president, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they don't always impact our dinner table.
No, but we
Um,
will.
yeah, but we do. And
Yes.
I think that's why it's so important, and also just, man, I have loved some of the community engagement when people are coming to the council meetings, like,
Yeah.
it is a really empowering to sit there and look at the sea of faces and to hear it, it's like, "Wow," I love the involvement and the
Yes.
caring and even the conflict. I think, there's not like, conflict isn't the problem. It's how
No.
we conflict that often causes problems, but I love being challenged. I love having different ideas.
Absolutely, and, when I started the Best of Belle Fourche Facebook page, the rules on there state, "You do not come on here to just gripe and complain." But problems happen in
Yeah,
our community. So if you bring a problem, I also want you to think through and bring me 2 solutions, and then we'll have a discussion and we'll work through it to find
yeah,
a final resolution.
yeah.
Because I think conflict is inevitable,
Yes, agreed.
problems are inevitable.
Yeah.
We have to be willing to sit down and have that conversation without the name calling, without the hate on each other, without the raising voices, things like that. You cannot be hot-headed and be in government, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think it makes things very difficult, and that's how everything stalls, in my opinion. Because you can have 1 or 2 council people on there that are hot-headed or just very dig their heels in,
Mhm.
and it will halt so much progress in
Yeah.
our community. And so that's why it's very important that you come out and vote for someone who you don't think is either they're on an agenda or gonna dig their heels in or going to be hot-headed or anything like that, because
Mhm.
that is not going to progress Belle Fourche
Right.
forward. Now, you can have there's presidents with hot heads,
Mhm.
you know? That's not gonna change whether our roads get fixed or not.
Correct.
That's not going to change whether our school gets an annex building or, I'm just throwing situations
Right.
out there,
No,
but
that's our day to day.
that
That's our
is
day.
our
Then
day to day.
that's why
Yeah,
I think this election matters so much is that
so
there are
much.
so many seats for the day to day stuff. And there is so much stuff that's in a halt right now because we don't have the people
Mhm.
for it. And
Exactly.
that's so unfortunate.
Yeah, because literally this little snafu has put a big damper in a lot of the decision making that's
Mhm.
happening in our city. It has made you guys spread super, super thin. Um, I know you've had to take on multiple other
Yeah.
uh positions that the mayor has put you on until we get more people in. So yeah, it's super, super important for people to turn out. And that election is going to be April 7th. And I believe it's from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Yep, but you can watch my Facebook page because I will be sharing that far and wide, and things like that. So that because I think it's important whether you're in my ward or not. So if you're in Ward 1, 2, or 3, get out and vote.
Yes.
It makes a huge difference.
Makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Yes. So thank you very much for listening, for tuning in this week. If you've got any questions, Polina, where can they find you?
Honestly, if you Google my name, I am everywhere. You'll have my cell phone, you'll have my email address, but cell phone 605-759-0808. Email address is Felina at blackhillsrealestatepros.com because I don't want 17 different emails I won't catch. So just go ahead and send it to my work email and I monitor that all the time.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for this. This
Thank
was
you.
amazing.
Yes, it was. I appreciate it.